Maybe maybe it would be helpful if I turned on the audio. Does that work now, Mike? Sorry about that. I just spent a brilliant first part of the segment with no one being able to hear me because my mic was turned off. I'm so sorry. It was so brilliant. It was so good. I was just discussing what we were going to be discussing. Now I don't have time. There we go. Sorry about that, my friend. I don't know. Like I said, I didn't touch any of this. Let me see if I didn't touch any of this stuff. Nobody has touched any of this stuff, but it just turned itself off. Fascinating, isn't it? Anyway, where were we? Okay, so now we have audio. Welcome to the Wells Report, North South, Coast to Coast, all the things that we do, news, analysis, commentary, and debate. Lots of things to discuss today. And as I said, I just did this brilliant summary of everything we're going to be talking about on all 3 hours of today's broadcast. And no one heard a word that I said. So there you go. Welcome to the new year. Off with a little bit of a stumble, but we'll be better this year, I promise. Stick around for news on our future on the Wells Report. So, what is happening today? Actually, not too much. The preparations are being made for what is tomorrow, the beginning of the Republican control of the United States House of Representatives. They have talked an awful lot about new priorities. USA Today reports it this way: the House Speaker's gavel will soon be held by a Republican, and that with that change will come new priorities, a series of investigation and partisan gridlock that could bring Joe Biden's political agenda to a crawl, if not a full stop. House GOP leader Kevin McCarthy, who's running to be the next speaker, has made clear in the weeks before the November 8th election and January 3rd, when the new Congress was sworn in, Democrats would no longer have one party rule in Washington. In 11 days, the House majority will change the direction of our nation, he said on the House floor. This was December 23rd, before voting against a $1.7 trillion spending bill. That spending bill, by the way, went to the Senate. Actually, it went to the Senate first before it came back to the House, because the House came up with it to begin with, and the Senate decided to go ahead and pass it, even though the Republicans shot themselves in the foot. Senate Republicans shot the entire party in the foot by not giving the House Republicans an opportunity to redo that budget bill in something that resembles sanity, in my view. That's just an opinion. And what happened is, strangely enough, the Senate Republicans just decided to take that leverage out of the hands of the House Republicans. It was a huge political mistake, but then again, I'm not real sure that there are any Senate Republicans. I'm pretty sure that they are essentially just members of the ruling class and kind of like it that way, and will work with Democrats whenever it seems to be a politically good idea. So, in December, McCarthy told Democrats that they would lose one party rule in 17 days, the countdown. December 2nd, he offered a bleaker warning when responding to Twitter emails that showed company employees debating how to handle news about Hunter Biden's laptop. In 32 days, House Republican majorities will be getting the American people answers and accountability. We'll see. Now, starting tomorrow, it will become clear how a House GOP majority will change the direction of the country. What do you want them to do? What do you want them to do? Do you want them to change the nation, change the direction? If so, which direction? What's the first thing you want them to do? You can call us at 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. You can call us then, and we will immediately take your response. You can also join us on the chat room on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, and later on today, Rumble and Patreon. By the way, if you're watching this broadcast on Rumble and Patreon, thank you very much for doing so. This was recorded earlier today. Republicans only control the House, meaning legislatively, there's not much the GOP can do. They can stop Joe Biden's agenda, but doubtlessly the Democrat-controlled Senate will stop the Republican agenda. So expect gridlock and expect a lot of political posturing. This is something the Republicans are famous for, and they have done a great deal of. They postured and done nothing. For example, Obamacare. 73 times they said that they were going to repeal Obamacare. When they got their chance, they blew it. And so I'm not especially sanguine or hopeful in any way, shape, or form that the Republican Party is going to do much of anything. So we'll see. Republicans are ready to hit the ground running, says Alyssa DeCuna. She's the co-chair of the law firm William Hale's Congressional Investigations Practice. I think the question is, what is not going to be on the table? One lawmaker to keep an eye on is Kentucky Representative James Comer, who is slated to chair the House Oversight Committee, arguably the premier investigative committee in the chamber. Comer has promised extensive investigations into Hunter Biden's financial dealings in compliance with tax laws. Concerned about whether Joe Biden has been compromised by his son Hunter Biden's business interests. Quote, if Mr. Biden's family members have deals with foreign adversaries, it could compromise his decision making as president in a way that threatens national security, said Comer. Also pay attention to Ohio Representative Jim Jordan, who will likely chair the House Judiciary Committee. Jordan is expected to open an aggressive probe into the Department of Justice in its search of former President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence and his handling of classified documents. We'll see what they do. Despite anticipated partisan gridlock that could span 2 years, the Republican House and Democrat-led Senate will have to work together to pass the next annual spending bill or risk a government shutdown, already giving us a preview for that. There may be some other areas of consensus, especially as both chambers have paper-thin majorities and will have to work across the aisle to get anything done. Both parties want to rein in big tech. Republicans want accountability for what they see as censorship of GOP members and perceived collusion between big government and big tech, also bias against conservatives. Democrats have focused their probes on antitrust issues, the tech industry's handling of hate speech, the rise of national white nationalism, the link between social media and eroding mental health. Though parties have different viewpoints, they both claim to want accountability. They have enough moderates willing to work across the aisle, even as Democrat Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota and Representative Ken Buck of Colorado, who have already worked on antitrust legislation. It's unclear what kind of legislation most parties might agree to, but in the coming months, it's possible House and Senate committees will have tech executives as witnesses in various hearings. Republicans and Democrats may also be able to work together to reduce inflation, but again, both parties have different ideas about how to do it. The GOP has been largely focused on efforts to reduce spending. Democrats have continued to push social spending programs like the Axed Child Tax Credit to help American families. What is not going to be dealt with, according to USA Today, with the end of total Democrat control of Congress, it's extremely unlikely key Democrat priorities will have any shot of getting through a now GOP-controlled House. We'll see. I'm not exactly sure. Once again, this is opinion. I'm not sure that the Republicans won't work across the aisle in good fellowship to try to build some sort of bridge for a Republican agenda of some sort, something that will be rebuffed by Democrats only after Democrat ideas are already passed, thanks to the bipartisanship shown by the Republicans. It's something they do. So, after the Supreme Court overturned constitutional right to an abortion, USA Today hasn't learned anything from last year. They're still calling it a constitutional right to an abortion, which never existed because you can't add a right to the Constitution of the United States without a constitutional amendment. You can't do it in the Supreme Court of the United States. You can't. You simply can't. The efforts ultimately failed in the Senate, but there were signs of a Democrat commitment to eventually enshrining the abortion rights law into the U.S. Code. That aspiration is unlikely to see support from GOP-led House of Representatives as Republican leadership heaped praise on the Supreme Court decision last year. So once again, welcome to the idea that what we have is we have divided government, which is going to be certainly less expensive, but what else will it mean? We'll delve into that as we continue on the Wells Report, the first show of 2023. Thanks very much for joining us. A little stumble out of the gates. Somehow my microphone decided to turn itself off. I wonder if it's trying to tell me something. We shall see. It is the Wells Report. Our telephone number, 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Let's get together and chat, shall we? Let's talk a little bit about the news, the issues of the day, and what you want the Republican Party to do. All that next on the Wells Report. Stay right there. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. What in the living hell is going on with this? All right. Yeah. Check 1 2 3 4 5. Check 1 2 3 4 5. Check 1 2. Check 1 2 3 4 5. Check 1 2 3 4 5. 5 4 3 2 1. Check 1 2 3 4 5. 5 4 3 2 1. Check 1 2 3 4 5. 5 4 3 2 1. 1 2 3 4 5. 5 4 3 2 1. 1 2 3 4 5. 5 4 3 2 1. 1 2 3 4 5. 5 4 3 2 1. Check 1 2. Let's do this. Check 1 2. Checking 1 2 3 4 5. 5 4 3 2 1. 1 2 3 4 5. 5 4 3 2 1. Shit. Freaking hell happened to this? Nope. Check 1 2 3 4 5. 5 4 3 2 1. 1 2 3 4 5. 5 4 3 2 1. 1 2 3 4 5. 5 4 3 2 1. John David Wells. Hello. Not much. Just trying to do the show. Something is awry on my microphone. Check 1 2 3 4 5. 5 4 3 2 1. 1 2 3 4 5. 5 4 3 2 1. 1 2 3 4 5. 5 4 3 2 1. 1 2 3 4 5. 5 4 3 2 1. I lost some level somewhere, and I don't know exactly where. Check 1 2. Why did you hang up? Why did you hang up? John David Wells. Hello. Oh, great. Why is that? Oh, that's nice. Oh, hi. Hi, I'm testing. I'm just testing. Okay. Let me try to figure out what's going on here. Yeah, I don't know exactly what happened there. Shoot. All right. So what's going on here is hang on. Was that loud? Greetings. My name is John David Wells. Sorry about that. I've been trying to figure out what's going on with my microphone. Things changed a little bit. I left everything as is. And for some reason, certain things changed, and I think I have an idea what it is. I'm going to be trying to work that out. As far as the coming back early, that was something that I still haven't figured out. I must hit a button while I was trying to go through the dynamics of getting some of the things fixed that apparently just changed their minds while I was gone on vacation. We went to North Carolina to visit my son Mitchell and his family. It was magnificent. We had a great Christmas holiday. We also had a wonderful celebration of New Year's with many of our friends, and I certainly hope that you had one as well. We're talking a little bit about the news of the day. The Republicans are going to take over tomorrow, and there are a lot of things that are going on that have to do with what their agenda is and perhaps is not going to be. And we're trying to figure out whether or not they're going to be anything close to effective. This has not really been the case for the Republicans for a long, long time. The Republican Party has a very, very good idea. They have a very good idea about, say, things like, I don't know, making brave noises. But those brave noises often don't lead to anything concrete, or even anything close to reality. And it's always been rather annoying to me that they have done that. And I'm hoping that what ends up happening is that they figure out exactly how to be a party. What I have seen in the Republican Party is an unwillingness to lead a great nation. They simply just refuse to do that. Why is it? I don't know exactly. I don't know why they don't want to lead a great nation. I don't know why they believe that for whatever reason, that the road to political prosperity is paved with mediocrity. I don't understand just exactly what they're trying to get done. And I think that most Republicans in the United States feel the same way. Am I wrong? I don't know. I just don't know. So let's talk a little bit. Thanks very much, Langston. Yeah, I unfortunately you could hear me clearly, but you shouldn't have heard me clearly because we have these little things that I leave for breaks and so on and so forth. And for whatever reason, one of them simply stopped, and I don't know why. So I'm glad you can hear me, Jeannie. Jenny, I appreciate it, and thank you, Brian. I appreciate those good wishes as well. Jenny also says Happy New Year to everyone. This is from the chat room that you can avail by going to Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. So Brian Galbraith says, really what you want to see the Republican Party do is boost the economy. That is not as difficult as you might think. What needs to happen is spending needs to stop. Yeah, the break was on. It just for whatever reason decided to stop running the very fancy graphics that we run during those breaks. And so what we'll do is we'll try to get that worked out as well. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for joining us today. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Not exactly sure that this particular hour of the broadcast is going to make the Patreon and YouTube, the Patreon and Rumble part of the broadcast, because I'm really not sure that I want to start 2023 with that kind of level of technological craziness. I tested everything except what went wrong. What have we learned? Maybe you should test everything. I'll do that next time. You're listening to the Wells Report. Thanks very much for doing so. Our telephone number 817-379-2172. We'll be back with more coming up in just a couple of moments. This is the second day of January. See you in a minute. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Just working on getting things back to normal. Yeah, it's just one of those things. You know, when we live in the future, we have machines that do some thinking for themselves. And they sometimes decide to do things of their own volition that really could be deleterious, rather, from the standpoint of actually trying to do a broadcast. So that's basically what's been going on. Mike says you can only go up from here. We'll see. We shall see. It is the Wells Report. We give you the news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We make commentary. That's not news. That's my opinion. And also, we invite debate. 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. Vietnam War was just an absolute horror for most Americans. That war lasted way too long, consumed too many lives. And many people think that there was not any real good reason to be doing what we were doing. But take those things aside, what made the Vietnam War disastrous was the political control of it. Politicians make lousy soldiers. While we have civilian control of the military, and that makes ultimate sense, in the case of the Democrat Party beginning in 1964, they decided that they knew better than the people that did this for a living. And what they did was they didn't want to look like big, nasty bullies going to a small country that had no chance against the United States military. And so what they did was they tied both hands and both feet behind the backs of the U.S. military in fighting that war. In spite of all of that, every major battle and 99.9% of the minor ones were won. Why are we discussing this? Because while we are not at war currently, there is a war taking place within the United States military that is very, very close to those horrifyingly terrible days of the Vietnam War and political control of the military. I'm not talking about civilian control of the military. I'm talking about political control of the military. And so what we see now is we see woke philosophy in the United States military. Woke philosophy, you can decide whether or not it has merits or not. Most of the people that I talk to think woke philosophy is nothing more than a rekindling of American racism for political effect. But you may have a different idea. But what we do know about woke policies in the United States is that they are politically generated. So whether you agree with them or not, that's not really the problem. The problem is that we have politics interfering with the people responsible for protecting this nation. And that is continuing. Now, GOP members of military oversight committees in Congress are signaling they're going to target the Pentagon over racial curriculum at military academies, efforts to root out extremists from the ranks, whatever those are. Because if we can go back to the rhetoric of, say, for example, the Democrat Party in the last couple of years, extremists are anybody who disagree with the enlightened New Age Democrat policies that keep being rammed down the throats of the United States thanks to the political machine that we are currently in the thrall of. And so the GOP now promises that they're going to go after these, quote, woke social policies. Congress passed a defense bill that will no longer require service members to receive COVID-19 vaccines. That was one of the many military policy decisions that the Republican-led House may spotlight in the next Congress. As it turns out, the forcing of American soldiers, men and women, to take those vaccines was pointless not just pointless, but ineffective. It was, again, political control of American public health. There is no such thing. What happens is that American public health became a political football. Are you seeing the theme here? Politics damages everything it touches. The least amount of political damage can only be obtained by having the least amount of political interference in life in the United States. Would you say any of that has been happening in the last couple of years, the last 10 years, okay, the last 20 years? In my view, the answer is most decidedly no. The government of the United States does far too much, spends far too much, and achieves far too little. It's awful, and you know it. So these people, the Republicans I'm talking about, they are saying that they're going to do something about all of that, and this gets us back to this idea that America is best when it's a meritocracy. In other words, the people that deserve, that earn, that actually rise above the status quo should be rewarded with success in this nation, not reduce success to some sort of egalitarian evenness that can be traced and appreciated only by politicians looking to quash those people that rise above the status quo and lift those people that are below the status quo up to a point that isn't real. One of the great things about a free society is that you can find something that you're great at. You can find something that you are absolutely superb at. And you can do that to make a wonderful living. But if politicians decide that everybody has to be the same, everybody has to have the same idea, and in those people that achieve far beyond the status quo must be ignored, must be quashed in order to not offend those who don't achieve. This headlong rush to egalitarian mediocrity is where the politics of the last 2 years for sure has been, although I can trace it, or I can arguably trace it back far further. The issue is going to get an increased focus from Congress, with Republican members will now control the House of Representatives and its committees, and they will hold sway over the chamber committees' agendas. I watched what the Democrats have done in many of these, especially in the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, and the wokeism that they want to bring in there, said Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, who was in line to become Speaker of the House. He said that during a November press conference. A 2022 survey conducted by the nonprofit Reagan Foundation found 50% of respondents felt that so-called woke practices in some way undermined military effectiveness. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has more urgent items on his agenda, said Sabrina Singh. She is the Pentagon's deputy press secretary. Austin, she said, is focused on the priorities he set out at the beginning of this administration: defending the nation, deterring strategic attacks against the United States allies and partners, deterring aggression, and building a lethal, resilient joint force. And we will continue to work with Congress in a bipartisan, bicameral way, just as we always do. In my opinion, that leaves out some of the things that are currently being talked about by Republicans. And that is woke policies that are being both indoctrinated in our military persons and used to quash our military persons if indeed they do not toe a political line, which is disaster. It is disastrous. Democrat Representative Adam Smith of Washington, who chaired the House Armed Services Committee in the last Congress, said the discussions surrounding these social policies should be framed differently, with more of a focus on addressing bigotry and racism. The United States did away with bigotry and racism in the United States military in 1947. A Democrat did that, fully integrating the United States military. Was there still racism? Yes. Yes, there was. Right up until the bullets started flying. Because everybody was part of the team required to stop those bullets from flying, indeed stop the people that were shooting them. And everybody came together. And it worked beautifully. Now what we have is for some reason, a willingness to get rid of people who don't toe the political line and who will be used to stop that gunfire, that incoming gunfire. If those people are gone, well, other people of the right, shall we say, with the right societal credentials, whether they're gay or transgender or of a particular racial mix, not including whites. And that's where we find ourselves. That is not how a military operates that is supposedly successful. And political control of the military, as I've described, is absolutely disastrous. Congress in December passed a version of the National Defense Authorization Act, which directed Pentagon spending. That included a provision reversing the mandate that all troops are required to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. More than 3,700 Marines, 1,800 soldiers, 2,000 sailors were discharged for refusing to get vaccinated. There were a lot of service members who were wronged by this policy, said Representative Bryan, who was an Army veteran. Mast sponsored legislation that would allow service members to return to duty at their same rank if they were dismissed because of a refusal to obtain the COVID-19 vaccine. Representative Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin, who served active duty in the United States Marine Corps, and said the COVID-19 vaccine played a role in recruits' willingness to join the military. I would submit that if 33% of 16 to 28-year-olds are not going to get the vaccine, that vaccine mandate played a role there, he said during a panel at the Reagan National Defense Forum last month, referencing recruitment numbers that are falling. But a Pentagon survey of young people from January to September, remember this is USA Today, we're about to hear bias, found the majority said vaccine mandate did not change their likelihood of joining the military, according to the DoD's SING. Some of the respondents said the mandate increased their likelihood of signing up. Well, we know about polling in these United States, don't we? Representative Chrissy Houlihan, the Democrat from Pennsylvania, a former Air Force officer who grew up in a military family, said she opposes revoking the COVID-19 vaccine mandate, but understands if it was part of the negotiations needed to pass the defense bill. What we know about the COVID-19 vaccine is that it does not stop transmission. It may indeed protect you to a small degree from the ravages of the disease itself, maybe even to a large degree. But it did not make you immune from COVID-19. I am walking, talking proof. I got 2 Moderna series shots and a booster, and then I got COVID-19. I was worried about the slippery slope of what it might mean for other requirements, said Houlihan when she discussed the idea of military readiness and that the health of the organization had to be well taken care of. Some Republicans highlight what they say is the teaching of critical race theory at service academies. CRT is an academic framework that examines how racism permeates institutions. It is one-sided. It is a predisposed set of ideas and ideologies, and then is essentially built backwards from a standpoint of research. They come up with the idea that there is blatant racism in all of these service academies and all of these institutions, and then work backward until they can find what they consider to be a reasonable case. And that's exactly what they've done. There is a small problem with that. The problem is that, say, for example, you end up seeing something in the New York Times called the 1619 Project, where the United States of America was absolutely sundered by an ill-informed, quote, journalist, unquote, who said that slavery beginning in 1619 was the downfall of this great nation. There's only one problem. There was no United States of America in 1619. She was trying to describe the Dutch, the Spanish, the Muslims who were selling their brothers and sisters into slavery in the first place, because the United States didn't exist in 1619. The United States came to existence in 1776 and did away with slavery in less than a century. But this is what happens when politics is the issue of the day and how we run everything. Problem with that is that it does run everything. Politics indeed will run everything right into the flipping ground. And this is something that we have to guard against. How do we guard against it? Well, we stop electing egocentric people that believe they know better than all of us to office. Notice I didn't say which party. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get you to follow the Wells Report 11th commandment. Elect thy neighbor. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. You can also join us on the chat room. Let's see. Yeah, this hour has been kind of a fun troubleshooting sort of thing. We've been doing the broadcast while I've been trying to figure out why things aren't working well. Let's see. My brother was in the Vietnam War, said Ginny. It was horrible. Yes, it was. Enlightenment and New Age has nothing to do with woke, says Ken. Woke is the new generation realizing they can get whatever they want by being offended and manipulating the system with their feelings. Good comment. So are we to trust McCarthy or what? That is a great question. Let me address that. Kevin McCarthy is running to be the speaker. He has run across some problems with conservative members of the Republican caucus. And the reason those conservative members are so upset with Kevin McCarthy is because Well, the Republican Party has essentially tried to play both ends against the middle. They've tried to be conservative when conservative policies were being asked for by the American people, and then they were behind the scenes offering bipartisanship to non-conservative ideas, hoping not to get caught. Neither of those things worked. They were caught, and indeed, they have never followed through on their conservatism, their so-called conservatism. So the conservative members of that party, and Kevin McCarthy was a part of all of this namby-pamby, moderate, being in the middle, bipartisanship, ruling class, we know better than you group, they called him on it. And so Kevin McCarthy is working to try to shore up his conservative credentials. For example, as a part of a final bid to convince the right wing to support his speakership, according to Fox News, he made major concessions to the group ahead of tomorrow's vote. The central concession is allowing for any 5 Republican representatives to force a vote of no confidence in the Speaker of the House. He vowed to end the practice of proxy voting and virtual participation in hearings, requiring lawmakers to be in Washington to participate in hearings and votes. Just as the Speaker is elected by the whole body, we will restore the ability for any 5 members of the majority party to initiate a vote to remove the Speaker if so warranted, he wrote in a letter to his Republican colleagues over the weekend. Congress never intended for Zoom, and no longer will members be able to phone it in while attending lavish international weddings or sailing on their boat. We will meet, gather, and debate in person, just as the founders envisioned. Previous House rules put in place by former Speaker Nancy Pelosi required a member of the House leadership from the majority party to initiate a vote to remove the current Speaker. Representatives Matt Gaetz, Andy Biggs, Matt Rosendale of Montana, Bob Good of Virginia have already vowed to oppose the McCarthy bid. So to answer your question, do we trust Kevin McCarthy? I don't know. Do you trust the Republican Party? I tell you what, those people who trust the Republican Party, raise your hands. You'll note that I'm not raising my hand. I'm going to have to see real action and a whole lot less talk. That's what I'm going to have to see. Let's see, what else do we have? Gary Olivier says, replying to Ginny Bayless, tough to call. I lost all trust in all of them. Both sides are playing us. They're dividing and conquering the country. This way they can continue to pick our pockets and turn their country into a communist third world. I can't really say the last word. But I can't even tell you what it rhymes with. But it's a bad place. Let's say sewer. There we go. Less Republican, less Democrat, more Constitution. Right there with you, Ann. We need our military members up and ready, considering such things as Taiwan, Ukraine, and North Korea. Correct. Replying to Ann Hoy Guzman, Ginny Bayless says, I agree, but we know who we should listen to. We need to wake up. Yes, we do know what we should be listening to. And it is time to wake up. Charles Crow says something interesting. Charles Crow says that rhinos are worse than Democrats. You know why they're worse than Democrats? Have you ever asked why rhinos would be worse than Democrats? Because Democrats are more honest. That playing both ends against the middle thing that the Republican leadership has been doing for the last 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, 100 years. Yeah, that's finally coming to the fore. People are finally realizing that that's what's happening. And so, yeah, rhinos are far worse than Democrats. You know the Democrats do not like this country and want to turn it into the United Socialist States of America. You know that. That's what the Democrat Party stands for. They stand for the quashing of merit for the sake of egalitarian wadism. And that's what's going on. Beth Ann says hello. Yeah, exactly. Happy New Year. Looking forward to solving 2023 world problems. Ready, set, go, says Gary Abshire. We're going to do our damnedest on this broadcast. We simply are. And why are we doing that? Well, because nobody else is. This is the Wells Report. Let's see. Clay Higgins of Louisiana should be the speaker. You need to look at the videos on him on YouTube. Well, I'm pretty sure that Kevin McCarthy is going to end up as the speaker. But make no mistake, the idea that there could be a vote of no confidence among the majority of House party members is a good thing. It is a very good thing. And I think we probably ought to pursue it. There's more coming up. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for joining us. Back with more. Hour number 2, in fact, next. Wow, that was fun. Not. Anyway, thanks for being with us. Back in a sec. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We report the news here fairly and honestly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. We make commentary. That's not the news. Simply my opinion, just as valuable as yours. And therefore we debate. We debate two ways on the telephone, 817-379-2172. If you have not called us at 817-379-2172, please do so. Call now. Operator is standing by. Also, you can join us on the chat room. It's flying today, and we certainly appreciate it. Thanks very much for joining us today. We've been talking a bunch of Republican politics. We have one more thing to discuss. It has to do with a guy named George Santos. George Santos has been making headlines since December 19th, writes CNN. The New York Times published a jaw-dropping article documenting false claims about his work experience, education, and many things in between. He later described those falsehoods as reported by CNN, which is biased, as resume embellishment, but admitted to misrepresenting his employment and educational background. Santos has claimed his grandparents fled the horrors of the Holocaust as Ukrainian Jews from Belgium, only to have his version of the family background contradicted by a review of genealogical records. Adding to the firestorm are recent developments that federal and state authorities have launched criminal investigations into Santos over his finance and fabrications. When he first ran for Congress unsuccessfully in 2020, Santos reported he had no assets, yet somehow he was able to lend his 2022 campaign $700,000. Throughout the twists and turns, one thing remained constant. GOP House Leader Kevin McCarthy has not condemned Santos, not over his admitted falsehoods, his apparent misrepresentation about family members fleeing the Holocaust, questions regarding his campaign financing, even reports of spending campaign funds on travel to places such as Miami. McCarthy has not yet returned CNN's request for comments about Santos. And it basically is essentially the idea that you can blacken as many Republican eyes as possible based on the reported miscreancy of Mr. Santos. Now, why am I reporting this? You know that the editorial policy of the Wells Report is not one to report on personal difficulties. But the situation is a little bit different in this case. One, he is now, as we have this broadcast, an elected member of Congress. The other reason that we don't talk about personal misfortune is because we like to wait until that personal misfortune is news at some level. But that's not why I'm bringing this up. The reason I'm bringing this up is hypocrisy. And that leads to a much broader question that I'd like to touch on this hour of the Wells Report. That much broader question is hypocrisy. And attending that is the political machine that all of us are in the thrall of. And that goes far, far beyond George Santos. But let's talk about Mr. Santos first. Mr. Santos has embellished. Some people say he has lied. I want to see proof of that lying. Some people are casting aspersions on his campaign spending. Some people are saying, how did a guy with no assets in 2020 somehow be able to lend his campaign $700,000? Let's deal with all of those. First of all, his embellishments. As you know, the President of the United States has embellished everything, including his religion and his supposed adherence to it. So that's a zero-sum game. Arguably, it's worse on the part of a president than it is on the part of a congressional elect. but I'll let you decide that for your own self. Let's talk about his campaign financing. There have been many charges of campaign finance miscreancy among many Democrats, Republicans, everywhere. That leads us to $700,000 mythically and magically appearing out of nowhere. People who run for Congress essentially show up not very wealthy. And regardless of how long they spend in the Congress, they seem to be able to amass millions upon millions of dollars. So once again, we're getting very quickly to a zero-sum game. Now, as far as the campaign financing and so on and so forth, that is an allegation. And elsewhere in this broadcast, we're going to talk a little bit about the rush to judgment. And we're going to talk about the willingness of the media to try people amongst its pages. And that leads us to the hypocrisy of all of it. The hypocrisy that Joe Biden can be the essentially unfettered, unmolested president of the United States, doing everything that George Santos is accused of, stands on its own. So what's the difference? The difference is that George Santos stands outside the political machine that is in charge of this nation as we have this conversation. A political machine, enough political power in a particular location with the cooperation of law enforcement and the cooperation of the prevailing media in that location. We have all those things. From one end of this nation, as I say at the beginning of every hour, from north to south, coast to coast, we have all of those things. Therefore, we have a political machine that is run by hubris, and a political machine that sees its destiny as changing the United States, fundamentally changing these United States into a politician's playground. We know that politician playgrounds invariably fail spectacularly. The Soviet Union used to rule Russia. The Soviet Union was a creation of the Communist Party, more socialist than communist. But that was run by hubris as well. Many of the same things we deal with in this nation brought down the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union decided that politics were more important than reality. In our nation, we have that all over the place. Politics now rules the roost when it comes to even gender among us. And the ridiculous notion that anybody can be anyone at any time for any reason. Which leads us right back to George Santos. Anybody can be anything for any reason at any particular moment as long as the political imperative is served. Except for George Santos. Now, before I go any further, do I have deep concerns about people not being honest when they run for public office? Absolutely. Absolutely, I do. I believe that people that run for public office need to be servants. They don't need to be self-styled better than everybody else individuals. But if you look at our current political mess, that's exactly who's running the place. The incompetence is easy to see. There are nearly 32 trillion reasons why this ridiculous political machine needs to be put out of power immediately. And how do you do that? Well, you change the political leadership of the country. How do you do that? In this particular case, you change the political leadership of the political parties. Have we done some of that? Yes. Have we done as much as we need to? No. But once you change the political leadership of the nation, what you then end up with is the need for that political leadership to clean house in law enforcement. After cleaning house in law enforcement, what that administration needs to do, whatever it happens to be, whether it's presidential or congressional, they need to stand up and tell the mainstream media that they have a constitutional mandate to be skeptical of not just the Republican Party in the American government, but the American government itself, of all parties. They need to focus the same harsh light of concocted, quote, realism on the Republican Party or on the Democrat Party as well as the Republican Party. But they don't. Why? Because they're a part of the political machine. And so the bully pulpit needs to come to the fore, something that I try to wield every single day. The reason I do this broadcast in this way is for that exact reason. What I am attempting to do is I am attempting to make it abundantly clear to you that you're being lied to. You're being lied to in every possible way. You're being lied to by your government. You're being lied to by the mainstream media. And those two factions cynically try to accuse their political opponents of everything up to and including the big lie, which sustained the last group, or the second to last group of people that were absolutely sure they were better than everybody else. And they proved it by killing 6 million Jews and anybody else that got in their way. These people haven't changed. The reason the United States is the way it is because the people that framed this nation realized that that is where politics invariably goes. And we are suffering from that right now. We already have an American left that cannot function without dishonesty. And in the academic / juvenile way of leftist politics, I say not socialist so much as sociopathic political leadership. What we end up with is we end up with a bunch of people just plain lying to you, sustained by the media and enforced by the law enforcement. Part of the bully pulpit to get the media under control also involves replacing everyone in federal law enforcement that calls the shots. I just do it in a blanket way. If it was up to me, I'd just say, you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. Everybody in every director position, in every law enforcement, the DOJ, every intelligence organization, everybody in the director level and up are gone immediately. You may reapply for your jobs. And that would put it back into the oversight of the political party that we must hold accountable. More in a moment. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for joining us. Hypocrisy, the political machine, the dishonesty, all of these things, the driving principles behind the federal government of the United States. And you know it. What are we going to do about it? Well, we're going to have to stop playing around, first of all. We have to start getting serious with these people and start making hard decisions and sticking with them. Gary asks, what's up with politicians embellishing their history or just flat out lying? It's a mental disorder, maybe rooted in not getting enough attention growing up. Maybe. Or maybe it's just the concocted capability of the flim-flam artist who can't do anything else in the United States except run for office. That's what I'm saying. Elect thy neighbor. Buddy says Joe Biden, Blumenthal, Elizabeth Warren, now Santos, they're all wrong in this. They absolutely are. Isn't it interesting that none of the people except for George Santos is being hounded by the media as George Santos is? Elizabeth Pocahontas type embellishment. How are they allowed to get away with it? Because they're a part of the political machine. We know that Biden may just well get away with it. He has a son named Hunter. Yes, true. Do you know anything about that? No. Why? Because of the political machine. The intelligence agencies, the federal law enforcement agencies, the Department of Justice would rather try to investigate Donald Trump for what has so far been an empty chase by numerous people trying to do exactly that. Now the DOJ is taking a shot at it. They are not going to be successful either. Do you think we're going to drain the swamp? Maybe some, but not all. Well, as soon as we start electing the right people and making the hard decisions and stop playing around, yeah, we'll be able to drain the swamp. Narcissism is a requirement to be a politician? Yeah, I'll say, says Gary. That insatiable need for attention, making up stories about themselves comes easy. It's a mental illness. They didn't get enough love, whatever. We're where we're at because good people shy away from the nastiness of politics. It's not nastiness. It's just plain character assassination. Good people stay out of politics because the swamp reaches up and sullies them. And it's at every level. And it's inexcusable at every level. This hypocrisy is inexcusable. We do not have an equitable law enforcement, a judicial system. We do not have an equitable judicial system. People will look beyond the reality to, say, for example, the identity politics that any given person carries and move forward on that, leading to the inevitable, okay, it's not the criminals that are the problem, it's the laws that make them criminals that are the problem. And all of that goes away in a blink when you start thinking about laws that are supposedly going to be passed to get rid of gun ownership in the United States. Nobody's going to give up their weapons. But if they pass a law that says they must, they create all these criminals. So is it the law? Is the law wrong in that case? The answer is no. No, the law is right on that case. We got to get rid of all these weapons. But the law is wrong in the case that the wrong people are going to jail. The law is wrong. Well, except for people who want to follow the Second Amendment of the Constitution. And that's where we are today. And that's bigger than the swamp. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We'll be back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We bring you the news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We make commentary and we debate. Thanks very much for doing all of those and at least being a consumer of half of it and a participant in the other half. I appreciate it. It was as brutal a crime as has decorated the American experience in most people's lifetimes. It was murder in a small town in Idaho. 4 University of Idaho college students were found stabbed to death in their house. Someone has been arrested. His name is Bryan C. Kohberger. He was taken into custody at his parents' home in Effort, Pennsylvania, where it appeared he'd been staying recently, according to Michael Mancuso, an assistant district attorney in Monroe County, Pennsylvania. Mr. Kohberg was pursuing a PhD in criminal justice and criminology at the Washington State University, which lies about 10 miles away from Moscow, Idaho, where the murders took place. He recently entered the program after graduating in June from DeSales University in Center Valley, Pennsylvania, with a master's degree in criminal justice. He's been charged in Idaho with 4 counts of first-degree murder and was being held without bail in Pennsylvania. An extradition hearing has been scheduled for Tuesday. This is a little bit old. He's already waived his right to fight extradition. He's going to be going back to Idaho. As a matter of fact, he said he was looking forward to it. These murders have shaken our community. No arrest will ever bring back these young people, said Moscow Police Chief James Fry at a news conference. However, we do believe in justice, and we believe that justice will be found through the criminal process. The arrest of Mr. Kohberger came 7 weeks after the college students were stabbed to death in a crime that horrified the small Idaho college town and the rest of the nation, too. Prompted many students to stay home and finish classes online after Thanksgiving. Residents had grown increasingly frustrated in recent weeks as the killer remained on the loose. One victim's father had begun to publicly criticize investigators. The police declined to say anything about the suspect's possible motive, said that a long knife they believed was used to carry out the attacks had not been found. But the arrest of a criminology student added another unsettling element to an already macabre case. The students who were killed, Madison Mogen, Kaylee Goncalves, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, were attacked in at least 2 separate bedrooms, probably as they slept. The 3 women lived at a rental house where the attack occurred. Mr. Chapin was visiting Ms. Kernodle, his girlfriend. 2 more roommates apparently slept through the stabbings, did not wake up until several hours afterwards. The police in recent weeks have been searching for the driver of a white Hyundai sedan they said had been spotted near the victim's home on the night of the killings. Chief Fry said on Friday the police had found a car matching the description. In a post on Reddit from 7 months ago, a user who identified himself as Bryan Kohberger asked people who had spent time in prison to take a survey about crimes they had committed. The survey listed Mr. Kohberger as a student investigator working with 2 colleagues in DeSales and asked its respondents to describe their, quote, thoughts, emotions, and actions from the beginning to the end of the crime commission process. Now, Bryan C. Kohberger is a guy who has been arrested on suspicion of murder in the first degree. He has been tried by the mainstream media ever since that arrest. And it led to a letter and a statement from the Kohberger family. And I want you to listen to this from Fox News. The family of the suspect in the November 13 fatal stabbings of 4 University of Idaho students have finally spoken out on that arrest. Bryan Christopher Kohberger, 28 years of age, was taken into custody by local police and the FBI at 1:30 a.m. Friday in the eastern Pennsylvania area on a warrant of charging him with 4 counts of murder and burglary for the deaths of Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Kaylee Goncalves, and Madison Mogen. Quote, the family said, we have fully cooperated with law enforcement agencies in an attempt to seek truth and promote the presumption of his innocence. rather than judge unknown facts and make erroneous assumptions, said Kohberger's family. The family continued to say, "We will continue to let the legal process unfold, and as a family, we will love and support our son and our brother." On behalf of the victims, Kohberger's family said, quote, "There were no words that can adequately express the sadness we feel, and we pray each day for them," unquote. They continue, "We respect privacy in this matter, as our family and the families suffering loss can move forward through the legal process." Kohberger, a graduate student studying criminal justice at Washington State University in Pullman, Washington, appeared before a judge last Friday in Monroe, Pennsylvania County Court. He is a 15-minute drive from his rental home from where the four students were stabbed to death on November 13th. As we have seen in our nation, there is a willingness to jump to conclusions, to rush to judgment. And that is exactly what the mainstream media has done in this particular case. Is it warranted? Never. Last segment, I was talking about the unequal justice being foisted on Americans by the people who are responsible for making those laws and their enforcement just and equal. The mainstream media didn't get the memo. I've been watching virtually every news organization in the United States talk about Kohberger as if he is this monstrous, terrible human being. And indeed, he may be. That's not the way we do things in the United States of America. But as we come to this conversation, we find a media that's more than willing to condemn in their pages anyone for any reason absent of the actual results from any investigation into those issues. They've done it over and over and over again. It's cost them hundreds of millions of dollars. It's going to cost them more. Because the mainstream media will attack anybody on the other political side and say anything necessary, up to and including a high school kid. And they will stomp him into the dust. Grist for the political mill and nothing more. Well, that's expensive. And it should be expensive. Because when you denigrate instead of report, when your default notion is that whatever you've heard, regardless of whether or not it's a full story, leads to an inexorable conclusion that simply will be reported and then justified as the absolute truth. It's awful. It's un-American. It's unconstitutional. What it does is it makes this nation less than. Now, Kohberger, I don't know the guy. I don't have any idea who he is. I know he looks frightening in mugshots, but then again, who doesn't? Okay, Nick Nolte. No, Nick Nolte didn't look especially menacing in his mugshot, but let's move on. This guy may indeed be the monster that so many people have decided that he is. But we don't know that yet. Is the case strong? We don't know that either. All we know of the case at this particular moment is that there is DNA evidence. What's the nature of this DNA evidence? Well, it's genealogical. It's a way to reconstruct the genetics of someone who is or could be responsible for a heinous crime like this. Is it something that will convince a jury? We don't know. There was a spectacular case of this nature involving a former football star, his former wife, and other people in that orbit. There was DNA evidence there too. But strangely, the jury found a different result than the one discussed by prosecutors. Were mistakes made by the prosecutors? Absolutely. Was there doubt? Yes. Yes, there was. And as we convict our criminals beyond a reasonable doubt, that particular trial ended up with a perplexing result. Will this one follow that footsteps again? We simply do not know. We just don't know. But we, the people behind the Wells report, had not reported on this story. And the reason we had not reported on the story was because, aside from and we did, by the way, report on the murders, beyond reporting on the murders, there was nothing to report. Now we know the identity of a suspect. We still don't know whether he has any kind of guilt whatsoever, and we won't know until the trial's over. And that leads to the reason we're having this discussion. Because the mainstream media has already decided that he is the terrible monster, that he is the killer, that he is the spiller of blood, the extinctor of young life. And that must stop. There are a lot of people that got very, very tired of hearing the word alleged, for example. Well, the alleged person did this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, okay. But to dispense with the word alleged, to dispense with the idea that a convincing story based on incomplete evidence, assumptions, speculation, because of an incomplete news conference. I watch them. I watch the ones where they said, no, we really can't talk about that yet. I watched the ones that said, until Mr. Kohberger gets back to Idaho, we can't unseal the indictment. When he gets back, they will. We will know more. And the lurid yellow press will point at all of this and say, see, we were right all along. Well, no, you weren't. Because you were trashing a guy before you knew whether or not he was actually the monster you portrayed him as. If, for example, he is convicted, the character assassination of Bryan Christopher Kohberger will be swept under the rug because, well, it all proved out to be true. But what's missing is the rest of judgment that occurred before Mr. Kohberger might have been convicted. That's a crime in and of itself. Civil. But all the time spent trashing Mr. Kohberger, from the time that he was arrested until this very moment, with scant knowledge, because the police weren't talking, speaks for itself. Yes, the investigation took a very long time. I understand that. Americans are used to seeing their crimes solved in the midst of 48 minutes worth of really well-produced and well-written dialogue. That's not the way it actually works. And I want to praise the investigators for keeping their mouths shut. Would that the mainstream media had followed that sterling example of self-discipline. I know it can be done. You know how I know it can be done? Because that's how we've handled this case. What is the news? Bryan Christopher Kohberger was arrested for the possible murders of 4 young college students. He is in the process of being extradited to Idaho. There will be more information about this crime and the results of the investigation that led to his arrest. But we don't have any of that yet. And that's the entire story. Except for the fact that the mainstream media decided to rush to judgment again. This is the Wells Report. Dare I say, a better news broadcast than what you're used to. Back with more in a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Sorry, my phone is yapping. I just turned it off. Where were we? Oh yeah. Let me get to the right camera. Our thoughts today are with Martina Navratilova, tennis legend. She has announced that she was diagnosed with stage 1 throat cancer. Initial tests also revealed another diagnosis. She has early stage breast cancer, unrelated from her non-invasive breast cancer in 2010. In a statement, Navratilova expressed optimism as she heads into treatment. The 18-time Grand Slam champion will begin treatment later this month. It's a double whammy. It's serious, but still fixable. I'm hoping for a favorable outcome, said Navratilova. It's going to sting for a while, but I'll fight with all I've got. According to reports, Navratilova is battling type HPV throat cancer. She noticed an enlarged lymph node in her neck during the WTA finals in November. A biopsy revealed the diagnosis. There's a strong prognosis. The cancer will respond well to treatment. During the first battle with breast cancer, Navratilova was deemed cancer-free after 6 months. She underwent a lumpectomy and 6 weeks of radiation. In 2017, Novartis video shared to her Twitter account. Navratilova described the cancer treatment, how she overcame her diagnosis. Being a top-level athlete, a pro athlete, you learn how to be positive. So that came in very handy as a patient. Being a positive person helped a lot, and surrounding yourself with positive people as well. Navratilova is well renowned on the tennis court. She won 18 Grand Slam singles titles, including the 1983 U.S. Open against Chris Evert. The victory helped propel her to a career Grand Slam. At the time, she became the 7th woman to reach that milestone. In retirement, Navratilova has been a studio analyst for the Tennis Channel. She will not cover the Australian Open, but hopes to contribute remotely through her battle. She is of very strong stuff, Martina Navratilova. Any of the people that do what she does arrives at that lofty achievement level through the process of dealing with extreme pain and discomfort, both mental and physical. These are early diagnoses that usually harbinges good news. As a matter of fact, this humble reporter is rather, shall we say, I'm rather happy about the fact that as I do this broadcast, I wear headphones. Why? Well, because that way you wouldn't see the bandages that I've been sporting for the last several weeks after some cancer was removed from my right ear. It was not terrible surgery. It was not invasive. Well, at least as invasive. It was invasive on my ear, let me tell you. But I've always said that alpha dogs end up getting their ears notched at one time or another, and I certainly have. It is basal cell skin cancer, and it was completely removed. Are there other sites? Don't know. We'll be finding out as I follow up. But regardless of the fact that I didn't make a living as a Grand Slam tennis player, my life as someone who has undergone the pain of becoming good at a particular sport at a relatively high level, swimming being the first one, baseball being the second one, with a small interlude in football, which was exquisitely painful, and I decided to forget that stupid game. Baseball, on the other hand, well, it's handed me pain. Baseball is painful. And it is exquisitely painful when you're playing with a blown rotator cuff, which with every throw gets worse and worse. Till eventually you have to do something about it. I did, was the recipient of spectacularly successful surgery, just as I was this time. Will there be more of this news for me? Maybe. Will there be more of this news for Martina Navratilova? Assuredly. But just as she says, being positive is essential. Being positive and being in the company of positive people, equally essential. It's a small spot on my ear. Hopefully that's all that's there. I'm more concerned about the process of finding out that there is no more of this on my person. The actual examination, from what I understand, leaves no secrets behind. So I have a little trepidation about that. You know, I still have time to get my six-pack back and my shoulders muscular and beautiful looking. We'll see. We'll see. But like I said, it's one of those things. Life puts marks on you. I wish Martina Navratilova absolute success in her battle over her cancer. And I thank everyone who has given me the good wishes that I've gotten based on this very small little piece that I found on me. Stick around. Every now and then, you simply have things that, well, refocus you. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with hour number 3 in just a moment. Well, that was a lot better hour, don't you think? I sure do. We'll be back in just a couple of seconds. North to south, coast to coast, around the world, this is the Welser Report. We report the news fairly, honestly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. I make commentary. That's not the news. It's simply my opinion, just as valuable as yours, and so we debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. It's what we do on this broadcast, and I appreciate your participation in it. It was horrible. It was nonsensical, and it happened during the New Year's Eve holiday. Authorities have charged Trevor Bickford, who was 19 years of age, with attempted murder and assault after he allegedly attacked two New York police officers with a machete in Manhattan on New Year's Eve. Bickford, who is believed to have traveled from Maine, is charged with 2 counts of attempted murder of a police officer and 2 counts of attempted assault. The NYPD and FBI are handling the investigation together. The FBI reportedly entered Bickford's Maine home Monday. Authorities are investigating him for potential ties to Islamic extremism. A high-level police source told Fox News, who has provided this story for us. It reported that he was being watched by the FBI's counterterrorism task force in the weeks leading up to the Saturday attack. The source also said Bickford recently converted to Islam, and a tipster claimed he had expressed interest in going to Afghanistan. Bickford's attack struck a rookie police officer first, identified only as Paul. Bickford slashed Paul in the head, then caused minor injuries to another officer before being shot. The FBI's New York field office did not immediately respond to a request to confirm the FBI's visit to Bickford's home. NYC Mayor, New York City Mayor Eric Adams, praised the officer's response in a press conference Sunday morning, saying the two who were attacked were in stable condition, expected to recover. And as we do a preliminary review of the body cam video, we will see how these officers executed the plan that was put in place by the New York City Police Department in ensuring that they were protecting those who came to bring in the new year. While authorities are investigating Bickford's potential ties to extremism, he is not facing any terror-related charges at this time. Quote, I want to be clear, the FBI, through the Joint Terrorism Task Force, is working very closely with NYPD to determine the nature of this attack. This according to FBI's Michael Driscoll. We will run every lead to ground. I also want to be very clear, as you've heard me say tonight previously, or have heard what was said previously, this is a very much ongoing investigation, so our ability to talk about specifics is limited. True. Now, when we bring all of this to the fore, once again, what we see is a news organization, thankfully, deciding to do the right thing, which was report correctly. Congratulations to Fox News for doing exactly that. This was the most recent statement by the police officers and by the NYPD and the mayor of New York City on this particular topic. Please watch. And we'll get sound as soon as humanly possible. Here, watch what I'm doing. See what I'm doing here? Let me see if I can get this working. It should have worked. That it didn't confounds me. Let's try again. Let me try this one more time. See what we can do here. There we go.
Thank you. And Happy New Year's, and it is a Happy New Year's. We have 3 officers who are going home. The 3 officers were attacked today. They were doing their jobs, the jobs that members of the New York City Police Department and other first responders and law enforcement officers do every day. And as we do a preliminary review of the body cam video, we see how well these officers executed the plan that was put in place by the New York City Police Department in ensuring we protect those who came here to bring in the New Year's. This attack took place outside of the screen area, and it is why the commissioner and her team ensures that we properly screen everyone entering the area where the viewing is actually taking place. When New Yorkers visited here, they visited and saw thousands of officers who were in the area making sure that we could have a safe bringing in the New Year's. And the 3 officers involved in this incident, they were doing just that. One of the officers heard from the police commissioner and I just a few days ago at his graduation. It just goes to show you, if it's not the first day or it could be your last day, the actions that police officers must take every day are life-threatening situations. I spoke with Paul and his dad, who's named Paul as well, and his mom and his girlfriend as he was being stitched up, and he was in good spirits. He understood that his role saved lives of New Yorkers today, and we're really pleased by the response and how our officers handled this situation. All 3 of the officers are in stable conditions, and there are no credible threats to New Yorkers at this time. This attack took place outside of the area that the police department has identified as the area that we wanted to do primary focus on. And these officers responded in an amenable, professional manner, and all the officers involved. And I must say that even after the incident took place, the responding officers made sure the scene was under control and returned to the primary focus of ensuring that everyone that was here in Times Square received the best professional service that we offer as a police entity and the other first responders that participated in this evening. I want to turn it over to the police commissioner this time, and then we'll hear from the FBI, and then we will open up to any further questions after whomever else needs to speak. Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for being here. I'll go over some details and reiterate a few things the mayor has just said. The information I'm about to provide is preliminary, as this incident is only a few hours old. Earlier this evening at approximately 10:11 p.m., officers assigned to the New Year's Eve detail were at the corner of West 52nd Street and 8th Avenue outside of the security screening zone when, unprovoked, a 19-year-old male approached an officer and attempted to strike him over the head with a machete. The male then struck 2 additional officers in the head with the machete. One officer, an 8-year veteran, suffered a laceration to the head. The second officer, who graduated the police academy on Friday, was also struck in the head, resulting in a skull fracture and large laceration. One of the officers fired their service weapon, striking the subject in the shoulder. The 3 officers were removed to Bellevue Hospital, where I am relieved to report that they are in stable condition. I would like to thank Assistant Directors of Nursing, Dion Bernadelle and Bruce Martin, and all the staff here at Bellevue Hospital for their excellent care of our officers. The subject was also removed to Bellevue Hospital, where he is being treated for his injuries. We are working with our federal partners for this investigation, and it is ongoing. I would like to stress, as the mayor said, there is no active threat at this time. This is another reminder of what our officers face. There were a lot of people out tonight. We are asking anyone who has any information to please call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-577-TIPS. And now I'd like to turn it over to the FBI Assistant Director in Charge, Mike Driscoll.
Thank you, Commissioner, Mayor. I appreciate the invitation to join you tonight. I want to start tonight by commending the brave actions by the members of the NYPD who responded to this attack tonight. Truly impressive to see what they do every day, and even more impressive to see how they respond in times of emergency. I want to thank the Commissioner and the NYPD for their coordination on this, and I want to be clear that the FBI, through the Joint Terrorism Task Force, is working very closely with them to determine the nature of this attack, and we will run every lead to ground. I also want to be very clear, as you've heard said tonight previously, this is very much an ongoing investigation, so our ability to talk about specifics is limited. And I do want to be very clear, as you heard the mayor and the commissioner state earlier, that there is no ongoing threat. We believe this was a sole individual at this time. There's nothing to indicate otherwise. Thank you.
And so that is what we learned from the authorities involved regarding this heinous attack on New York's finest during the New Year's Eve celebration. While authorities are investigating Bickford's potential ties to extremism, not facing terrorism charges at this particular moment. But that may indeed change. What I was heartened by was a return of the FBI to what they do best, which is to actually identify and investigate crime. Michael Driscoll of the FBI acquitted himself brilliantly there, and it's going to take 10, 20, 30 more years of that level of FBI investigation and reporting to the people of the United States for them to undo their sullied relationship with we, the people of the United States. Now, that notwithstanding, there are a few things that jump out regarding this story. This young man had been being observed by the FBI. This young man had been identified as a possible terrorist. And yet, there was no way for him to be interdicted by the FBI based on their understanding of the law. Questions simply must be asked regarding the FBI's dealing with this particular case, and we will indeed ask them in the next segment. How is it? I'll give you an idea what we're going to try to discuss. I'm going to ask, why was it that the FBI had a terror suspect under observation and then must have noticed that he traveled from Maine to New York City? Was that not worth a simple stop beside the side of the road saying, "Hey, Trevor, where are you headed? And why? Mind if we search your car?" But none of that happened. Why didn't it happen? Under what circumstances would it have happened if the FBI had been the FBI instead of, say, for example, a political action group? More about that in a moment. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Trevor Bickford is alleged to have taken a machete to two NYPD police officers during the New Year's Eve celebration in Times Square, or in the area of Times Square. We are not going to convict him here. Will there be other charges? Likely. Likely. Should there be other charges? I'm not sure. But if it's possible for federal charges against terrorism to be leveled against this man, I certainly expect that they will be. We don't know. And the reason we don't know is because we don't know what the FBI is going to do next. Already someone with great knowledge of both the police, the FBI, terrorism of all kinds. Indeed, the guy I'm referring to ferried people off the island of Manhattan after the towers fell. He used a boat. He says, well, you know, we have to make sure that we take the credentialed ones identified by the left, we have to handle them with kid gloves. If the law and our legal system is fair and equitable, no, we don't. All we need to do is follow the facts. As FBI agent Michael Driscoll just said, we're going to run all of the information that we find to ground. Good. Questions must be asked. Those questions are simple. Had Trevor Bickford been, say, for example, I don't know, a public worker for the Trump campaign or administration, would the FBI have handled him differently? How is it that the FBI and their counterterrorism efforts had this guy under observation, had identified him as a possible terrorist, had him under observation, and yet he was able to travel from Maine through Rhode Island, Vermont, New Hampshire, Connecticut to get to Times Square? How was he able to travel all that way without being interdicted by some law enforcement who would search his car and would find the machete? Assuming, of course, he didn't purchase it in New York City. Why is that? Again, was it because he wasn't, say, for example, a Trump devotee? He wasn't a Proud Boy? He wasn't an Oath Keeper? Because you know that any members of those three classes would have been interdicted. Don't you? If the FBI had not spent most of its time, at least most of its public time, in the effort to try to bring down a president or continue to bring down a president, a former president, would they have had more time to actually do the work necessary to realize that this young man was indeed a genuine threat before he had a chance to hit a couple of police officers in the head with a machete? These are questions that must be asked. Gnashing our teeth over the answers, not required. But the questions have to be asked. And I, by God, will ask them. And were I in a more powerful position, I would even demand answers, which I would then report to you on this broadcast, because that's what this broadcast is for. Hopefully, the constraints that I face every single day doing this broadcast will be lifted at some point, and I will have more resources. Expect me to use them wisely when, not if, that happens. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. I was just talking about the FBI and Trevor Bickford, a 19-year-old who hit 2 New York City police officers in the head with a machete. He will face charges, and we will see. Isaac says that he disagrees with the premise that the Proud Boys and other Trump supporters were treated differently than the suspect. It's only because you missed what I said. If I had said that Trevor Bickford had been a member, what I said was that had Trevor Bickford been a member of the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers, he would have most certainly, if he was under FBI scrutiny, which he was, not as a member of the Oath Keepers or the Proud Boys, but as a potential terrorist. If he had been a member of the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers, I guarantee you that the FBI would have visited him before he had a chance to get to Times Square. You can disagree with that if you want to, but I think you're whistling Dixie in the maelstrom. Or resources were misused on the Proud Boys and Trump supporters instead of preventing the attack. All I'm saying is this: the FBI needs to spend more time fighting crime and less fighting in a political argument. That was my point. And I'll stand by both of them. Let's talk a little bit about President Trump's tax returns. The House Ways and Means Committee finally got the holy grail of Trumpism. What they were able to do was they were able to finally release Donald Trump's tax records. And what we found was a whole lot of nothing. As written by Edward J. McCaffrey, who is the Robert C. Packard Trustee Chair in Law and Professor of Law, Economics, and Political Science at the University of Southern California. He has written a piece in CNN.com that starts like this. Hallelujah. The House Ways and Means Committee has released former President Donald Trump's tax returns from 2015 to 2020. If nothing else, this will release most of us from being asked about the release of Trump's tax returns, as I have been for over 6 years now. As a point of fact, I've been talking about how ridiculously dumb it was for President Trump to not release his tax returns, especially in light of them being released anyway. Ridiculous. It was a silly mistake. It was an unforced error, Mr. Trump. You should have never done that. You should have simply released them. Your success, even though people are carping about it, your success is unmistakable. Your achievements decorate the Manhattan skyline. Obviously, you are a successful entrepreneur, even though there are people that are questioning that based on 5 years of tax returns. They point out, my God, he paid absolutely nothing. Well, the only difficulty with that is there was 1 year where I was trying to find the stats so I could quote them directly. There was 1 year when I believe he paid $1.2 million in taxes. The average is far more than you and I have ever paid in income tax or likely ever will. If you average those 5 years, which is something that I would hope to do. But the article that explained all of that is somehow missing from Google these days. I wonder why. So, what happens in this particular piece by Mr. McCaffrey is this. What we got from the latest data dump is thousands of pages of returns, exhibits, schedules, and such. Dedicated accountants and journalists will now pore over these documents. We're sure to see plenty of headlines and bombshells. Except we already know the basic story. Donald Trump is not a tax evader. He uses every possible opportunity he can, like most billionaires, to save himself as much money in tax as he possibly can. It's legal. It's what you're supposed to do. And then they get into this particular piece gets into, well, we already know that Trump is a bad businessman who seems to lose money on everything from casinos to golf clubs with steaks and vodka and even so-called university in between. So the main reason he often pays so little, if any, in taxes is he often reports a loss. He also lost other people's money and got big tax breaks for that. That's called corporate law. The problem is not Donald Trump. The problem is corporate law. Trump benefited from the huge head start, more carping, the huge head start given to him by his father, Fred, which continued to pay dividends with large capital gains from the sale of inherited property in 2018, leading to Trump paying taxes that year, just under $1 million, but there was another year where he paid more. Like his father, Trump emerged as an aggressive and rather crude tax avoider. I don't know why they would put crude in there. I think it's actually pretty sophisticated. Using standard tactics like putting the kids on the payroll, writing off personal expenses, overvaluing in-kind charitable contributions, and so on. The Friday release showed that Trump did not donate his presidential salary to charities in 2020 as he had promised to do. As in fact, he had not made any charitable gifts in 2020, probably because he wasn't feeling very charitable. Would you feel charitable having been Donald Trump for the 4 years previous in a country that was doing everything they possibly could to overthrow his fair and true election as president of the United States? I don't think so. Doesn't bring that up in this piece, by the way. Trump's taxes, according to Mr. McCaffrey, pushed the lines of propriety, and his companies sometimes cross them, as we know from the Manhattan DA criminal conviction of the Trump Organization. It wasn't a criminal conviction of the Trump Organization. It was a criminal conviction of a criminal within the Trump Organization. That's called bias. But then again, this is an opinion piece. But sometimes nothing in the story, like the dog that does not bark. There are some nothings we can resolve to do something about in 2023. Nothing is what Trump paid in federal income taxes in 2020 and many other years. He paid taxes in at least 2 of those years, big sums in 2 and a small sum in the third one. Trump may not have paid net positive income taxes in his life. He's not alone. Billionaires pay no income tax. Many do so perfectly legally, and that's what Donald Trump has done. If Donald Trump had not paid taxes fairly or legally, he'd be in jail already. Now, what Mr. McCaffrey says, that's unacceptable when the IRS fails to audit a prominent rich person to whom they have to examine it, whether because it's too hard, they don't have the time, or for any other reason. Why would the rich pay anything in taxes at all? And he says that's a trick question. The rich already have ways to pay nothing in taxes. See the first nothing above. Yeah. And then the simple math of the matter is that if the rich pay nothing, then the not rich pay everything. That's true. That's true. It's sort of like this non-tax hike among the middle class promised by President Biden. He didn't raise any taxes in the middle class. President Biden raised nobody's taxes in the middle class. It's true. Absolutely. Absolutely true. What he did was create rampant inflation, which raised the price of everything. You do that by making gasoline and diesel fuel more expensive, which makes the transportation of goods and services more expensive, which makes those goods and services more expensive. People pay more, and who else gets paid? Well, the federal government in taxes. The more money you make, the more taxes you pay. A hidden tax hike that affected all of the people who pay nothing, because billionaires pay nothing. All of us. I'm sorry, we paid everything because the billionaires pay nothing. It's absolutely true. But that's another discussion. Let's get back to Donald Trump. So Donald Trump, according to this particular piece, now leads to carping about what the government has not done to close these tax loopholes. The simple math of the matter is if the rich pay nothing, then the not rich pay everything, which is how you finance a gigantic government. The middle class pays everything. Nothing is what the Congress have done. Nothing is what the Congress has done. Over the many Democrats of Democrat and Republican leadership about getting to the rich to pay taxes fairly is not something that they've done. Well, unfortunately, that's also not true. They have paid taxes legally. And just exactly how much does any individual need to pay the government of the United States? Should there be a cap on that? I believe there should be. I believe there should be. Nothing is what the Republicans seem to want to give to the IRS, which lack the resources to do something about getting the rich to comply with the law. That's crazy, too. It's also creative interpretation, Mr. McCaffrey. The Democrats have run the government for the last 2 years unfettered. They could have fixed that anytime they wanted to. Don't try to blame it on Republicans. Blame it on the Democrats who did nothing, while you're blaming Republicans for doing nothing. Then he says, maybe, just maybe, 2023 will be a better year for all. I can write nothing at all about Trump's tax returns, and we can celebrate Congress by doing something to provide nearly $80 billion to strengthen the IRS as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. A good start about making the wealthiest Americans pay something. They do pay something. As a matter of fact, if we had actually fixed the tax system the way I had suggested, they would have not been able to avoid not paying taxes. But there would have been a cap on what those people do pay in taxes. Because I believe it's ridiculous that someone making $1 billion would thus have to pay something north of $100 million in personal income tax. I think that's ridiculous. Would we have tax write-offs if my tax plan went in? Very few, if any. As a matter of fact, you know that being able to write off the interest on your house loan, I'd get rid of that one. You know what that would do? That would make houses more affordable because they wouldn't be the tax dodge for the middle class. Would it hurt people off the get-go? Sure would. It sure would. Because the price of houses would crash. Because houses aren't things to live in. Houses are ways to protect you from paying exorbitant tax rates. In my plan, would you pay an exorbitant tax rate? No. If you were making less than $250,000 a year, you'd pay 15%. You're paying 28% now or more. If you made less than $500,000 a year, you'd pay 12%. Less than $1 million, you'd pay 10%. $1 million and up, you'd pay 8%. Would you be able to dodge those taxes? No. Would there be a cap on what any individual can pay in taxes? Yes. Yes, there would be. My tax program makes it possible for you to be able to sit at your kitchen table and figure out your taxes in about 20 minutes. Withholding would stay in place, and chances are very, very likely that you would get a tax refund every single year, just like clockwork. It would also make a much smaller IRS that wouldn't need $80 billion more in their budget. They wouldn't need people with guns wandering around to collect taxes from the American people. It'd be simple. You owe 15%. Pay your 15%. Done. That's the way it should be. This particular piece, however, points out a pretty serious bias that we can use as an example that is the worst of just exactly what American journalism has turned into. This particular piece starts out as an anti-Trump screed and then gets to the meat of the matter, which is Congress must do something to get these billionaires to pay something. And we can debate that as you see fit. That's not really a problem. But once again, the headline talks about Trump. The reality talks about Congress. Democrats Democrats have had the Congress for 2 years. Why didn't they do something? No, we're going to blame Republicans instead. Oh, really? That's called bias. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Oh, okay. Where'd you get that, Isaac? Let me read that. Lied about donating his presidential salary for 1 year, 2020. He paid taxes. He donated his salary in 2017, 18, and 19. Let's see. How much, by the way, how much did President Biden give up to charity? Just ask him. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number, 817-379-2172. Sorry. So Isaac Tate gave me, excuse me, Isaac Tate, mountain flipping cedar. Kills me every year. Okay. Isaac Tate gave me the figures. I must have misread the article that I read because I saw a $1.2 million tax thing, but I also saw another zeros or so. But we're going to use Isaac's numbers, okay? So in 2015, Isaac says that President Trump paid $640,000 in taxes. In 2016, $750. In 2017, $750. In 2018, $999,466. 2019, $133,445. And in 2020, $0. Okay? That added up to somewhere north of $1.7 million in taxes over those years. The average is $735,735.16. So the average tax bill paid by President Donald Trump in the years where his taxes were made public, those years average out to just under $300,000 a year in taxes that he paid. How much did you pay? I'll tell you this, in 2021, I had to pay all the taxes I paid, plus an additional $800 or so. I mean, it was well north of, I don't know, 20 grand or so, plus $800. So all I can tell you is President Trump paid $295,735.16 on average in the years that were released by the Ways and Means Committee of the U.S. House of Representatives. It's just under $300,000. Considering that a president in those same years makes $400,000 a year, that's pretty good. I mean, when you start thinking about it, that's pretty good. That's a lot of money. Should he have paid more? That's a matter of your opinion. Okay, that's all. It's just a matter of opinion. But is it Donald Trump's fault? No. Is it the fault that we have an unwieldy and stupid tax system? Yes. I just gave you a tax system. You'd have paid a hell of a lot more than that. As a matter of fact, I'm going to figure it out right this very minute. Let's see, $400,000. He makes $400,000 per year as president of the United States. Okay? So that would put him in the under $500,000 a year income bracket. So that means he would pay 12% equals. He would have paid $48,000 every single year. $48,000. But he paid more. He paid just under $300,000 a year. Now, what about the corporate taxes? Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, corporate taxes, yeah, they would pay something reasonable as well. And they'd have to pay it. Unfortunately, they do pay taxes, but they pass that cost along to us. You really can't do anything about that. Now, you're saying, well, wait a minute, in your tax plan, would the government make enough money to operate? A reasonable federal government would have plenty of money to operate. But look at what's happened. All the money being fleeced from the American people through all kinds of dishonest means, foisted on us by the government of the United States. With all of that, and this is bipartisan, of course, we're $32 trillion in national debt. $32 trillion. And we don't have flags on the moon. Well, we have flags on the moon. We don't have flags on Mars. But for $32 trillion in national debt, we should have flags on Mars and Triton and Europa and the moons of all kinds of places everywhere. But we don't, do we? No. Why? Because we spend all that money on the ground. We essentially float the world economy. And frankly, I think it's time for that to end. So in other words, I want a federal government that lives within its means, reasonable means. My tax plan provides for all of those reasonable means, but does not provide for all the unreasonable ones. So there. Just under $300,000 a year in taxes for the years that the Ways and Means Committee wanted you to have information about. Oh, there's one other question. When are they going to release your tax returns because you're a pain in their political butt? When do you think that's going to happen? I'll tell you when. Just as soon as you're enough of a political pain in the butt. That's the precedent. Oh, by the way, I also want to see Joe Biden's tax returns, Nancy Pelosi's tax returns, Chuck Schumer's tax returns, Steny Hoyer's tax returns, all of those tax returns. How about you? This has been the Wells Report. I hope you've enjoyed it. God bless you and yours, and I'll see you tomorrow. Okay. So there you go. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you again tomorrow.